Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Rockstar Manifestors podcast. I am Patti, your host and manifestation coach here. And I am here today to talk to you about a specific aspect of mindset. And I'm going to actually give you just start off with a quote. I have not been able to identify who this quote is associated with, or it's one of those where it says unknown, but it's a well-known quote. And the quote goes, being positive isn't pretending that everything is good. It's seeing the good in everything. So that sums up in a nutshell what we will be talking about, or what the topic will be this week. So join on in and let's get going. So just to kick things off right off the bat, like the quote said, positivity or having a positive attitude doesn't mean saying everything is great, especially when it isn't, or saying that something that isn't true is true, right? In the hopes of believing it, or trying to cover it up, or make things look different than they are. It's really choosing how you look at things. And this may or may not be a new concept for you guys, because a lot of us, I think all of us really, get accustomed and develop a way of thinking that we have either learned from other people, observed, or circumstances, kind of dictated, so to speak, because we didn't really know, or were not aware, or did not consciously choose what we want to believe. The default, our brain, our human brain, is wired to default to the negative thinking, negative bias of things. And that goes back to, I don't know all the scientific details and data, but it goes back to our prehistoric brain, where we were possibly, as humans, constantly in danger. And so we were always looking for danger, and our brain knows what we know keeps us safe, and what we don't know is dangerous. So choosing to change that way of thinking takes practice, and it takes intention and awareness as well. So this is what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. And really, the quote was a great way to start, but also the best example, I like to give examples and to illustrate ideas or topics, or ways of looking at things. And really, the best example is the most simple, that again, I'm sure we are all familiar with. It is the example of the glass being half full or half empty, right? Both of those statements are true, assuming the glass is a half full, or approximately half full. Both of those statements, the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, are accurate, factually true. The difference is how you choose to look at it. And the glass being half full does represent the optimistic point of view, the positive attitude, or the positive mindset. And the glass being half empty is the negative, or the I don't know if negative is a good term all the time, but negative, or pessimistic, any word that you might want to associate as opposite of positive. I guess that would be negative is the opposite. But either way, it's a positive, and or negative, or insert another word that works better for you. But neither statement is false. And if you were to look at it, and if you were someone who by default says the glass is half empty, you could, and someone else says the glass is half full, you can't look at someone and say that is not an accurate statement, right? So that's where I wanted to show and distinguish that we're not trying to say, or I'm not trying to say, that you have to say something that isn't true. You might not naturally believe it, right? So if you are someone who is by default, or very used to saying and looking at the half empty perspective, it might feel challenging. It might actually feel hard to believe the half full, or it's just like, oh, but I don't, but I don't see it that way. That could be a very natural response when someone says something to you, or when you're learning this process. I don't see it that way. And that's okay. That is also an awareness and part of the process, and where you now start to intentionally choose the way that you're going to think about it, instead of just falling into the default pattern. And also know that the learning of it and the choosing does also take practice, because the default and the embedded way of thinking has a long history of establishing itself, right? So don't judge yourself if it doesn't come naturally, if you don't see that perspective right away. It's also a learning process and a journey. So but the bottom line is, looking at circumstances and situations and people, or whatever it may be, and knowing that you can choose which way you're going to look at it. And that also means that if you catch yourself in the default thinking, and during this learning process, you might not know what the other way of thinking is, but you might start with saying, okay, I'm aware that I'm using default patterning, or patterned default thinking, conditioned routine ways of thinking. And catching that is a stepping stone. It's a starting point. And if you don't know what the other one is, it might take a while, and you might ask someone, or you might just think about it for a bit. So just know it's a process, and that you can choose, even if you fall into old patterns, you can choose to reframe it. And so, and that applies, like I implied, to other circumstances, to negative or challenging or difficult circumstances. And I'll touch on this a little bit more later on, but it's not saying that that's not accurate. It's just, what can I look at differently, or what good can I see in this situation? So, and there is a specific reason also that I am choosing to talk to you about developing and nurturing a positive attitude right now, as in this time of year. First of all, it happens to be the month of October, and the month of October is recognized as Positive Attitude Month, those nationally recognized days or holidays. So October is Positive Attitude Month. And I don't think that it's a coincidence. I love that this month, Positive Attitude Month, is in October, or that October is Positive Attitude Month. And I don't think it's a coincidence, just because the way the universe and synchronicities, and coincidences, if you will, happen to work out, because it's often at this time of year, starting around maybe September-ish, maybe even as far back as summer, depending on what aspect of life or what you're looking at, but somewhere in this neighborhood, September-ish, October-ish especially, this could be a time of year that you might start thinking that you have, any number of things, wasted the year, you haven't done or accomplished enough, or all that you set out to accomplish, or you didn't start something that you said you were going to do, or anything along those lines, like, oh man, that falls in the formula of, oh man, we're in this time of year, and all this shit hasn't gotten done, or that pessimistic, that half empty perspective might really kick in at this time of year. And so I want to point out that aspect of it, because first of all, because it's what I do. I point out things and help you see things differently. And the reframe that I have for you, in that, oh man, this year is already, shot to hell. There's no point in doing anything now. There's no point in getting started now. The reframe that I have for you is, instead of I've wasted the entire year or haven't done anything, why not switch that to, let's finish this year strong? Or what can I accomplish in this last quarter of the year, or whatever time frame that you happen, to be catching yourself in this way of thinking. So finishing the year strong, what do you have time to do? What can you get started in this season that will carry you into the next year? And so instead of looking at this last part of the year as a waste or as not really worth, not enough time, or it's just not worth starting anything because we're already at this time of year, why not choose to look at it as either how can I finish strong, or another way to look at it that I like to use for myself as well is why not use this time of year as a runway into the next year? And why not see what I can get started right now and have that momentum carry me into the next year instead of, lollygagging. It's a word that that I picked up from uh, a mom, the mom of an ex of mine. And so I just love the word lollygagging. She used it so cute. But why, instead of lollygagging and wasting time and focusing and dwelling on what hasn't been done, how do you think that affects your perspective when you then get to the beginning of the year, let's say, and say, okay, now I want to do this, or now let me get started again? Because my thinking, my belief, if you will, is if you start or spend this last quarter of the year ruminating, or maybe just not even ruminating, but not taking advantage of this last 3 months, 90 days, several weeks, whatever, not taking advantage of it, you actually, instead of starting the year fresh, I look at it as you're actually starting the year or whatever the next cycle is already defeated. You've already gone into it with a defeated attitude. And I will talk a little bit more about this as we get closer to the end of the calendar year as well. But a lot of times for those people who do tend to set resolutions or goals at the beginning of the year, I will be talking to you about how I don't use it the beginning of the calendar year for that. But for people that do that set resolutions, and you go into it with the thought process of, oh, well, let's see if I can get further than I did last year. Or let's see if I can stick with it longer than I did last year. Or let's see if, whatever the case is, where you're focusing on the fact that you didn't do it, that you didn't get, how far you didn't get, how long you didn't stick with it. You're already starting out at a deficit with a defeatist attitude. That's how I see it. So instead, why not get things started now? This is the time of year. If you follow my podcast and just other, if you participate in any of my workshops or programs or anything like that, I talk often about how I follow the cycles of the seasons and the lunar cycle, and how they all really have this built-in framework for taking action and reflecting and letting things go, and how it all works together. And the fall is like the dreamy time of year, right? This equates to the third quarter moon phase, which is like looking forward. We've taken action, we've learned some things, and we now are like, okay, how can life look different? How can this circumstance look different? Well, you can also start by saying, or look at it, how can my thinking be different? And how can that lead to different results and different circumstances? So the reframe is looking at this last quarter of the year as the runway into next year, or as a let's finish strong and see how much I can actually do in this chunk of time. So if you fall into the category of this year's wasted, or it's too far, I'm not trying to convince you again to lie to yourself about what you have or haven't done. I'm not saying that you need to say, oh, don't say, how was the best example? Like if you're someone that says, I haven't accomplished XYZ, I'm not here telling you to say that you have accomplished XYZ. It's acknowledging that, yes, I haven't accomplished or done or started XYZ. And what can I do from this point forward? So you see the difference. It's not about covering up or making it look different, or, since I live in LA, kind of like the Hollywoodizing of it, making it seem like it really isn't. It's acknowledging that and saying, okay, so I haven't done all the crap I said I was going to do this year. I didn't get to the things. How can I start now? How much of it can I get done now? So I hope that distinction is different. And so also the question that I would recommend that you use is, what can I do to change it? Because that opens up your mind that starts receiving things. What can I do to change the circumstances? You'll maybe start to get an awareness about, looking at things differently, changing your thinking. What are actions that you can start small with and build on? What is, like, if you have a huge project, what is a section of that or a part of that project that you can get done in this length of time and then move on to the next step instead of waiting and starting with that, really building that defeated attitude. So this shifts your thinking, doing intentionally looking at the positive aspect of it, or looking at what is possible, or shifting to what is possible instead of what hasn't been done or accomplished, is, I categorize it as the way I have learned it, possibility thinking versus defeated thinking. And so that ties into, like, starting off with that defeated attitude. But possibility thinking is rewiring your brain and getting into the habit of saying, but what is possible? What can I do? Instead of saying, oh, it's not possible to do the whole thing in the next 3 months. Okay, that's probably a true statement, depending on the size of the project or the results that you want. But what is possible might be a smaller scale of that, or a starting point. But doesn't it feel better to think about what is possible instead of what has already been wasted, or what is not possible in this same time frame? Both can be true. That's this concept of duality that I talk about a lot as well. Both statements are true, or both realities are true. But which one are you going to choose to think and believe and start taking action on and get results, or start momentum? And starting with a defeated attitude does not set you up for success. You have to, you're starting at a deficit, if that makes sense. You're starting with negative in the bank as opposed to starting at the starting line. You're starting like halfway back, like with a penalty, if you will. So that is my perspective. That's really what I am here to share with you, that this is a time of year that you can still get things done. You can still start things. You can still see results, and stop beating yourself up. We can't go back in time, at least as of yet. We can't travel back in time physically. And so what does it accomplish to focus on what happened or didn't happen, what you did do or didn't do between, January and right now, October? What can you do instead? Let's look at that. And so there are also benefits. I have broken them down into like internal benefits and external benefits that come with developing a positive attitude, a positive mindset, and what I like to refer to as the rockstar mindset. This practice of developing a positive attitude and mindset is a great start, or a foundation to developing and nurturing and living the rockstar mindset. And that, for me, the way I use that is believing that whatever you want is possible, regardless of what anyone else says. And I like using the term rockstar mindset because that's something that I think we can all relate to, where rock stars are like, when someone says, I want to be a rock star, most people tend to say, oh, that's not possible, or that's such a big dream, or that's so far-fetched, or who are you to think that you can do that? And it does, not happen overnight most of the time, but the ones who do make it and succeed and have longevity believe in those dreams so strongly that it really doesn't matter what other people say to them, or try to discourage them. They keep going and go through the struggles and the hard parts and the challenges and the ups and downs, and just follow that dream. So that's what I will also be doing. I talk about that all the time, so you'll hear other episodes about that as well. But going back to the benefits, the internal benefits that I have found, and this came from studies, but I don't have like the name of the study or the reference. So I'm just these are ones that I have found and that made sense to me, but I don't have an actual study to reference. So the internal benefits are a longer lifespan because of overall lessening of the stress. When you're not focused on the negative or beating yourself up, when you're focused on the positive aspect of things, you have less stress. So you can have a longer lifespan. Lower chance of depression, again, because you're looking at what is possible. You're looking at the good of any circumstance or any person. And even if it's not readily visible or not something that you can identify right away, that might become a game. What is the good in this? What is coming from this to help you shift into that possibility thinking? Number 3, more resistance to sickness, like the common cold. Now, again, I don't have the scientific data for this, but it does make sense because when you are, I know that there are examples when people have that positive mindset when they're sick, that they achieve things that other people might not have said are possible, either doctors or other people or whatever the case is. So with anything from a minor to a serious, it can't hurt is how I look at it. It can't hurt, and all it can do is help or maybe stay the same. But a positive mindset or attitude in the healthy way can't hurt is how I look at it when it comes to health and wellness and things along those lines. Increased physical and mental well-being, again, because of the mindset. So your mental health is improved because you're not always looking at the negative or the pessimistic or the downside of things. Less risk of death from cardiovascular disease. And I know that ties into that stress and how that affects our heart and our cardiovascular system. So there's less risk of that increasing. And again, this is just in the sense of our mental well-being, maybe our physical well-being, but I am not a medical person by any stretch. And again, these are aspects or benefits that I have looked up and found in like articles and reading things, but I did not find, because I didn't search too deeply, the actual study itself or one that I can reference you to. And lastly, more developed coping skills during challenges, because by developing this mindset, you then say, okay, this, situation might be crappy. It might suck. It's not good, but there is some benefit to it. There's something good somewhere, even if I don't know it yet. So your coping skills get better because you're looking for the positive and knowing that this is not going to be a permanent circumstance. So those were the internal benefits. And the external benefits are more overall motivation. When you have this possibility thinking, you are more motivated to take action. You are more motivated to say, okay, these are the good things. These are the wins instead of the losses. You focus on what you have done, what you can do, instead of the opposite, instead of the half empty perspective. More friends, because you like to be, or people, I think in general, like to be around positive people, knowing that yes, everyone has their bad days and their bad moments, and that is absolutely okay. But when you are overall a positive or happier person, you attract more people. More people want to be around you. And I think we can relate to that, as in who we like to be around ourselves, right? And then many more happy memories, because you're looking at the good things. You're looking at the positive aspects of a circumstance. And you have memories of, oh man, this was really challenging, but we found this fun game, or we did this. So it really leads to having more happy memories by nurturing and developing this positive mindset, or this positive way of looking at things, the attitude. And an example that I have of that, just very generally and very quickly, that I have experienced, is like when someone is always pointing out the hard parts of something. Like I have a family member who travels with another family member, and so a lot of times, we will hear stories like, oh, well, this was, so hard, or this person did that, or they didn't do this. And so I said, but what was the good part? You guys keep traveling together. So what is the good part of it? Right. And so knowing that focusing on the good also, like I said, gives you more happy memories. It also gives you better stories, I think. Right. And I'll get into this later in another episode, but having those moments like, yes, this was challenging. This person did or didn't do that. Great. Don't say that it didn't happen, but don't stop there. Why not just, okay, this didn't go well. This part wasn't so fun, but overall the experience was fun. or overall, this was a good thing, or this is what I enjoyed about this, or anything along those lines. There's always something positive to find, and a lesson possibly as well. So to wrap up, yes, life can be challenging when it comes to work, our personal relationships, our work relationships, circumstances. Life will throw speed bumps. Bad things will happen. And I'm not here to tell you to say the bad things are not bad or that they're not happening, but there is nothing we can do about some of those circumstances. There's nothing we can do about the life speed bumps and the challenges that come our way, about them happening. But we can choose to say, okay, now what is possible? Now what can I do? What is the good? What is the funny? What is the something on the other side of that coin, right? Because there's duality in every circumstance. So there's nothing we can do about the challenges themselves, but we can choose how we look at them and how we move through them and choose to make the best out of every situation that we experience or that we're thrown into or that occurs. So I will wrap up just like I started, reminding you of the quote that being positive isn't pretending that everything is good. It's seeing the good in everything. So that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous fall season. And if you are listening to this in the future at a time that it's not fall, this perspective applies anytime. There is no wrong time to start. There is no wrong time to change your perspective to a positive attitude. And there is no wrong time to have this as a reminder. So if you're listening to this in the future, I'm sure it's a perfect time that you happen to be hearing this, or a great reminder if you already know this and just are coming across this. So thank you guys, and I will see you next week. Take care.